Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us in today's webinar presented by Lakes Environmental, in which we're going to go over the IRAP-h View software product, talking about human health risk assessment of air toxics and how our software products can help you efficiently and quickly get through these complicated calculations. My name is Michael Hammer. I'm a certified consulting meteorologist and a senior product specialist here at Lakes Environmental. I've been a part of Lakes for about 7 years now and been working in air quality modeling and meteorology for much longer than that, even specializing in things like modeling and CalPUF modeling and meteorological data processing in support of air dispersion modeling analyses. And I've also had a hand in the most recent update to our IRAP-h View software product. So we wanted to go over what IRAP-h View is and talk about the recent changes that we put into the version 5.0 release that we just did earlier this month. Now, most of you are familiar with Lakes Environmental. Here, just showing what it is that we're known for, what it is we do around here. Most of you probably know us from our software products, AirMod View, CalPUF View, IRAP-h View, and more, as well as our freeware products that people use all over the world. We also do custom IT solutions. You may have been part of our recent webinars on our Aquamis solution, which encompasses all of emissions inventory and air dispersion modeling and reporting requirements into one custom solution meant for a facility. We have some other webinars coming up about our Aquamis products, so be on the lookout for those announcements. And of course, we do training all over the world throughout the year on air modeling, risk assessment, emission inventory, and more. But here today, we're going to be talking about human health risk assessment, and specifically the Human Health Risk Assessment Protocol. It was published by the US EPA some years ago, back in 2005, and represents national guidance for conducting multi-pathway health risk assessments for air toxics. You can find the full protocol available on our website. Under the IRAP-h View product page, there is a tab for the protocol, and you'll get each of the individual chapters, 1 through 9, plus the appendices, all available for convenient download in PDF format. And you can search through those documents and spend some good time reading through that. The basic process outlined in HHRAP is starting with a facility characterization, looking at the modeling domain, looking at the sources of air toxics and quantifying the emissions as well as the source properties themselves. You then move on to air dispersion modeling, whether that's done typically with AirMod. In the past, it was also done with the ISCST3 model. Also characterizing the exposure scenarios, which means looking at the modeling domain around these sources and looking at where health risk may need to be quantified. From there, you estimate the media concentrations, you quantify the exposure, and then you characterize the risk. All as part of the protocol. There are a lot of steps, a lot of equations involved, and this process becomes complicated very quickly. So using a product like IRAP-h View can help simplify everything that needs to be done. Looking more closely at human health risk assessment. So you have a source of toxics, or COPCs, chemicals of potential concern, and they're releasing these into the atmosphere. And through various pathways, both direct and indirect, those are absorbed or enter the body of people. And from that, we develop risk, cancer risk and non-cancer risk. Through all of these pathways, you can have direct inhalation of these. And of course, direct inhalation of pollutants is going to have an adverse impact on human health. But you can also get these through other ways, such as eating contaminated products, drinking contaminated liquids. Any pathway through which that can enter our bodies is something that needs to be quantified in these risk assessment calculations. The different ingestion exposure pathways are listed here: through soil, drinking water, produce, beef, milk, pork, poultry, eggs, fish, and then direct inhalation. And each one of these exposure pathways has a set of calculations with them to estimate the cancer and non-cancer risk of the various COPCs. And as you go through the HHRAP document, there are numerous equations, numerous calculations that have to be performed. Now, years ago, this was done pretty much by hand. You would get detailed spreadsheets that had all of the calculations integrated into them, and you'd enter in the various levels of concentration of these pollutants, and you'd have to do all these calculations by hand. It was a very time-consuming process and very difficult to do. So that was where IRAP-h View came into the picture. While the protocol was in its draft stage and being finalized, Lakes Environmental had the opportunity to contribute to the finalization of that document. And many of our directors, Jesse Tay, Chris Tay, Mike Johnson, as well as our director of US operations, Brian Matthews, were all involved in the finalization of that document. And what came out of that was the IRAP-h View software product. So with IRAP-h View, you can look at multiple chemicals, multiple sources, and multiple locations and calculate the risk values for them very efficiently and quickly. So you can see the impacts in the visual overlay of the application and perform all these calculations very quickly. You just have to supply the COPC emissions from each source, but your sources are already there from an air modeling run. You can look at multiple risk receptors very quickly, even identify which risk receptors are going to produce the highest cancer and non-cancer risk values. It's all done very simply with just a few clicks of the mouse. So IRAP-h View minimizes the cost and the time and resources over the traditional calculation methods used back in the day with, huge complicated spreadsheets that needed to be triple and quadruple checked. With IRAP-h View, we've done all the QA for you. So you can rest assured that the cancer risk numbers you're getting out of IRAP-h View fully meet the standards of the protocol. IRAP-h View features an extensive COPCP database with all fate and transport parameters as written in the protocol. It also gives you the ability to customize the COPC database for your own chemicals of potential concern that you may have. It features a graphical user interface that is very familiar to current Lakes users and advanced contouring algorithms so that you can also take a look within your modeling domain of where the potential concerns will occur. What do those risk contours look like, as well as the air modeling parameters? And of course, the comprehensive risk output, which comes in the form of tables where you can sort these tables through numerous pathways and numerous source breakouts and look at individual receptors in each pathway and each exposure scenario to really figure out what it is that's controlling risk in your domain. Now with the IRAP-h View software product, there's two main components and then an optional third component. The optional component is the air dispersion modeling side. You have to run an air dispersion model and take the air dispersion modeling output to perform your risk calculations. Now, if you happen to use our AirMod View software product, there is a utility in there called Risk Gen. You'll see it as a risk menu in the AirMod View application. You turn on risk mode, and that enables Risk Gen. And if you use the Risk Gen utility within AirMod View, then your run will be optimized to meet the standards written in the HHRAP document, specifically Chapter 3, which covers air modeling. So that then saves you even more time because now you're not worried about improperly setting up your air modeling. It's already taken care of for you. Once you finish modeling with AirMod, you then take your air dispersion modeling results and you need to format those for input to IRAP-h View. I'll show a demo of air to risk here in a minute, but it accepts AirMod contour plot files as well as ISC ST3 and ISC prime contour plot files. Once those contour plot files have been formatted, the results can be read and processed directly within IRAP-h View. So let us take a look now. I'm going to first show our air to risk utility. So air to risk here, as I mentioned, is the kind of formatting utility. It's going to read in plot files from an air modeling run, whether that happens to be from AirMod or from ISC. And I have a sample project that I've already conducted my air modeling run with. This project has a number of sources. In this case, I'm only looking at one single point source, this STCK1. So you can choose from a given air modeling run which sources you actually want to analyze risk for. So if you've conducted an air modeling run and it has sources that are not of interest, you can of course exclude those, and it makes the process very easy. You simply import your list of sources from your AirMod or ISC3 input file. You then see in the Air Modeling Plot Files tab, for each source, you're going to have a series of contour plot files. So whether you conducted your air modeling through IRAPh View or through DOS or whatever process it is you do to conduct that air modeling analysis, this is where you would input your plot files. The first four tabs here, vapor, mercury, particle, and particle bound, are going to be your chronic risk drivers. So these are the annual average plot files as directed by the IRAP document. The other tabs then are acute vapor, mercury, particle, and particle bound. And these are going to be the 1 hour average contour plot files that came out of your modeling run. And if you have multiple plot files, say if you executed 5 years with each year in its own individual plot file, you could add each of those to the list here into the appropriate pathway so that those can then be analyzed by IRAPh View. Again, if you're using AirMod View, this process is made even more simple because you would just click the button to load your RiskGen file. The RiskGen file is what's going to contain the references to all of your 1 hour and annual plot files for each of the modeled pathways, vapor, mercury, particle, and particle bound. Once the plot files have been analyzed by Air to Risk, we then jump over to IRAPh View. So IRAPh View version 5, a very similar look and feel to the Lakes products. For those of you that have used our software in the past, you'll feel right at home using this software. I'm going to load in a sample project here, and we can take a look at the interface. So the first view that you see is called the site view. So your site graphics view is your modeling domain. It presents the sources, it presents the calculation grid nodes from your modeling run, any water bodies and watersheds that you need to add into your project are displayed here. And just like our other products, you have this simple overlays view so that you can control what it is you want displayed in the main display window. So if I don't want to see all of these little calculation grid nodes, which are the receptors from my air modeling run, I turn those off and make it a little more easier to see. Now in version 5, one of the biggest features of what we've added here is the tile maps feature. Those of you who use AirMod View or CalPuff View or our other software products are already aware of the tile maps feature. With this feature, you can quickly load in automatically downloaded base map imagery here. So I'm going to switch to the Lakes satellite map server. If you have a current maintenance agreement on our software products, you're able to use this, and it brings in high resolution imagery for your project area. And as I zoom in over the source, you can see how this automatically gets higher quality the more that I zoom in. It loads in higher and higher quality imagery so that you can then use this to more accurately draw any objects that you need to in the display. So if I zoom out and I see that to the south of my facility, I have some kind of water body down here, and that was not something I had already added into my project, I would come to the water body polygon, and I could start clicking to place the vertices of this polygon. I'm just going to do a little portion of this water body here, this river. Once it's complete, I can then identify the necessary parameters for that water body, like calling this a stream. I would come in and look at the air parameters, which are already drawn from the air modeling that has been imported to this project via air to risk. And I would identify the necessary site parameters for this water body that have not already been filled in, or adjust the default values as necessary. So with that tile maps feature, it makes it even easier to really visualize where these risk impacts are going to occur. Another great feature about IRAP-h View comes in the identification of our risk receptors. So we already have a source. That source was brought in from our air modeling run. And when we identify a source, we have to specify emissions of our COPCs. As I mentioned, we have an extensive COPC database already built into the software with all of the necessary parameters that are needed to calculate risk. You can see a huge list of parameters there as I scroll through that table. You can also define your own COPCs. And in this project, I've identified benzene. I also have mercury and mercuric chloride. The mercury and mercuric chloride emissions are done using the mercury wizard because, of course, we have to account for elemental and divalent mercury when doing risk. So the mercury wizard helps with that calculation. But once I've identified the emissions, made any changes to the source-specific site parameters as necessary, I have to identify risk receptors. The risk receptors are going to have the different exposure scenarios applied to them, the water body, the watershed, if applicable to the area. It's going to be where the relevant air parameters are applied. I have to identify some site parameters as necessary, scenario parameters for the different exposure pathways that are identified. I have to go through and identify all these. Now, there are defaults in place, and one of the major updates to version 5.0 was going through, updating, and replacing some of these site parameters based on more current guidance. But to identify where these risk receptors are needed, it's not always explicitly known. You may have, for example, if I zoom in with my satellite tile map imagery, a residential neighborhood, like one that you see here in the map display. And in this residential neighborhood, I could have a whole series of calculation grid nodes where there's a whole lot of different air parameters that have been modeled. But if I'm curious about what the maximum is within this area, well, there's a utility within IRAP-h View called the Risk Receptor Identification tool. And with this tool, I draw the polygon around my area of interest, say this residential neighborhood. So I have this risk receptor identification polygon, and it tells me just what the polygon itself is. But then when I look at the maximums, this goes through and analyzes all of the calculation grid nodes for me and tells me where the maximum air parameters are for each of the scenarios described here. So my deposition terms, both wet and dry, my concentration terms for each of the phases that have been modeled. And I can then specify, say this is a residential area, I have resident adult and resident children that live within this residential area. So those are the exposure scenarios that I want to analyze. And then it tells me, oh, okay, you have 5 risk receptors that have been created where one or more of the air parameters were identified as risk drivers. I have to come through here, and then for each of these new risk receptors that were generated, I go through and identify my water body and my watershed. And there's going to be a series of some other parameters that I also have to then specify. So the air parameters have already been pulled in because my air dispersion modeling results were there. My site parameters, I need to specify some additional soil mixing depth. Again, these can be easily modified from default values if that's something that you need to do. making sure that I have all this data filled in. There's scenario parameters that can be adjusted for each of the exposure scenarios, and COPC site parameters that can be adjusted for each of the individual COPCs. So I now have 5 new active risk receptors within my domain. Now it's time to perform my risk calculations. It's checked all of my 10 risk receptors, and because I don't see any incomplete information here, I'm ready to run my risk reports. There's 45 different risk cases being generated, but this process takes all of 4 seconds, as you can see. The calculations, complex though they may be, are done very quickly and efficiently through IRAPh View. And now that I have calculated my risk, I can come to the risk tables. I switched to the risk results view from my site view, and I can now break this out into any number of ways. By default, it starts with the risk summary, but I can run my risk by COPC. I can look at the individual pathways and then start breaking out each of the individual components that make up that risk, and I can run reports on all of these. Some new feature of version 5 that has been mentioned in our release documentation is that we've added several more pathways, such as maternal intake and daily inhalation intake from dioxins and furans, the deposition terms, new risk reports that you can run on your results. The table filter is what allows you to really drill these results down. I can take a look at, say, the inhalation risk for specific scenarios, at individual receptors, filter that by sources if I had multiple sources, filter it by COPC if I had multiple COPCs, run the report, and then get the numbers out. Each of the tables is also color-coded, so anything that is below a specified threshold will be highlighted in blue. If it's above a specified threshold, then it's highlighted in red, and there's controls for controlling what those thresholds are. You can see for each exposure scenario at each receptor what the cancer and non-cancer risks are as I scroll through the table. And then the exposure pathways themselves can also be analyzed on a receptor by receptor basis for each individual scenario. So there's a lot of information presented here. The graph, when you have multiple COPCs, is also great for helping identify which COPCs are really driving the cancer risk or non-cancer risk at a given receptor. So that is IRAPh View. Again, some of the new features that we have added in our latest release, version 5.0, we have new risk types available for analysis, the dioxin furan intake and PCBs, as well as deposition terms. We've updated the site parameters tables based on the most current guidance that is available. You now have access to the worldwide georeference base maps, the lake's satellite automatically downloaded aerial photography, as well as the existing OpenStreetMap and OpenCycle maps. And then we've gone through and improved just about every facet that you can imagine of the user interface, including base maps, overlays, enhancing the graphical options, and even more. Now, if you have previously used IRAPh View, we have a special upgrade offer. If you contact our sales team, you see the email listed there, sales@weblakes.com. Contact them before June 30th, and you're going to save $200 on getting the latest version of IRAPh View running on your computer. Now, in the last few moments here, I just want to take a second to mention that our next webinar is going to be a quick turnaround. We're going to have a webinar this upcoming Monday, April 30th, 11 a.m. Eastern or 4 p.m. Eastern, whatever time works best for you. You see the registration links there, tinyurl.com/11a-18081, tinyurl.com/4p-18081. Type those in for whatever webinar you want to participate in on Monday, because we're going to be talking about the US EPA Air Mod system updates. So just a day or two ago, the US EPA published brand new executables for AirMod, AirMet, and AirMap. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, you're not going to be conducting a risk analysis without doing your air modeling first. So major updates to the AirMod modeling system impact a lot of different things that you can be doing in this field. So we're going to be updating AirMod View in the coming weeks. And first, we're going to have this webinar on Monday just to give you an overview of what exactly changed in all of these executables. It's a big deal when this happens. So come back on Monday to talk with us again, and we'll go over the system updates for the AirMod modeling system. Now, if you have any questions for us about IRAP-h View, any technical questions on how it works, or if you just want more information about the product, we'd love to hear from you. You can contact us at support@weblakes.com. Again, that email is support@weblakes.com. That upgrade offer, if you're interested in that, is sales@weblakes.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. I want to say thank you for joining us here this afternoon. We're glad that you could be a part of our presentation, and any questions you may have, please shoot those on over. Hope you enjoyed the presentation today, and I hope to see you again on Monday. Have a great day, everyone.